Hello everyone, we are from Group 12, consists of Abi Widhiantoro and Bagas Pragiwaka, who would like to present our discussion about magical realism. Magical realism is a genre of literature that depicts the real world as having an undercurrent of magic or fantasy. Magical realism is a part of the realism genre of fiction. Within a work of magical realism, the world is still grounded in the real world, but fantastical elements are considered normal in this world, like fairy tales. Magical realism novels and short stories blur the line between fantasy and reality. Chiefly, Latin American narrative strategy that is characterized by the matter-of-fact inclusion of fantastic or mythical elements into seemingly realistic fiction. Although this strategy is known in the literature of many cultures in many ages, the term magic realism is a relatively recent designation. First applied in the 1940s by Cuban novelist Alejo Carpentier, who recognized this characteristic in much Latin American literature. The history of magic realism. The term magischer realismus, which translates to magic realism, was first used in 1925 by German art critic Franz Roch in his book Nach Expressionismus Magischer Realismus, after Expressionism Magical Realism. He used the term to describe the Neo-Sachlichkeit or New Objectivity, a style of painting that was popular in Germany at the time that was an alternative to the Romanticism of Expressionism. Roch used the term Magischer Realismus to emphasize how magical, fantastic, and strange normal objects can appear in the real world when you stop and look at them. The genre was growing in popularity in South America when Nach Expressionismus Magischer Realismus was translated into Spanish in 1927. During a stay in Paris, French-Russian-Cuban writer Alejo Carpentier was influenced by the magic realism. He further developed Roch's concept into what he called marvelous realism, a distinction he felt applied to Latin America as a whole.
In 1955, literary critic Angel Flores coined the term magical realism, as opposed to magic realism, in English in an essay stating that it combines elements of magic realism and marvelous realism. He named Argentine author Jorge Luis Borges the first magical realist, based on his previously published collection of short stories, Historia Universal de la Infamia, a universal history of infamy. While Latin American authors made magical realism what it is today, authors had previously written stories about mundane situations with fantastical elements before magical realism was a recognized literary genre. For example, Franz Kafka's The Metamorphosis, a novel with themes that today's critics would consider to be magical realism, was published in 1915, a decade before Roch wrote about magic realism and well before the genre emerged in Latin American literature.
The characteristic of magic realism. Every magical realism novel is different, but there are certain things they all include, such as 1. Realistic setting. All magical realism novels take place in a setting in this world that familiar to the reader. 2. Magical elements. From talking objects to dead characters to telepathy, every magical realism story has fantastical elements that do not occur in our world. However, they are presented as normal within the novel. 3. Limited information. Magical realism authors deliberately leave the magic in their stories unexplained in order to normalize it as much as possible and reinforce that it is a part of everyday life. 4th, critique. Authors often use magical realism to offer an implicit critique of society, most notably politics and the elite. The genre grew in popularity in parts of the world like Latin America that were economically oppressed and exploited by Western countries. Magic realist writers use the genre to express their distaste and critique American imperialism. 5th, unique plot structure. Magical realism does not follow a typical narrative arc with a clear beginning, middle, and end like other literary genres. This makes for a more intense reading experience as the reader does not know when the plot will advance or when the conflict will take place.
Magical realism figures. In this section, I will tell you about some people who have big impact on magical realism literature. The first person is Franz Roh. He was born 21 February 1890 and passed away at 30 December 1965. Franz Roh was a German historian, photographer, and art critic. He was believed as the one who coined magic realism. Roh is perhaps best known for his 1925 book entitled Nach Expressionismus Magischer Realismus Probleme der neuesten Europäischen Malerei, or in English is After Expressionism, Magical Realism, Problems of the Newest European Painting. The second one is Gabriel Garcia Marquez. He was born on March 6, 1927, and passed away on April 17, 2014. Gabriel Garcia Marquez was a Colombian novelist, short story writer, screenwriter, and journalist known affectionately as Gabo or Gabito throughout Latin America. Considered one of the most significant authors of the 20th century, particularly in the Spanish language, he was awarded the 1972 Neustadt International Prize for Literature and 1982 Nobel Prize in Literature. Love in Time of Cholera and 100 Years of Solitude are his few of many famous magic realism books. The next one is Isabel Angelica Allende Yona. She was born on August 2nd, 1942. She is a Chilean writer. Allende, whose work sometimes contain aspects of the genre magical realism, is known for novels such as The House of the Spirits or La Casa de los Espíritus in 1982 and City of the Beasts, La Ciudad de las Bestias on 2002, which have been commercially highly successful. Allende has been called the world's most widely read Spanish-language author. In 2004, Allende was introduced into the American Academy of Arts and Letters, and in 2010, she received Chile's National Literature Prize. President Barack Obama awarded her the 2014 Presidential Medal of Freedom. The next one is Sir Ahmed Salman Rushdie. He was born on 19th of June 1947. He is a British Indian novelist and essayist whose work combining magical realism with historical fiction is primarily concerned with the many connection disruptions and migration between Eastern and Western civilization, with much of his fiction being set on the Indian subcontinent. His second novel, Children, 1981, won the Booker Prize in 1981 and was deemed to be the best novel of all winners on two occasions, marking the 25th and the 14th anniversary of the prize. His fourth novel, The Satanic Verses, was the subject of a major controversy, provoking protest from Muslims in several countries. Here is the list of his magic realism books. There are Midnight Children on 1981, Shame on 1983, The Satanic Verses on 1988, Harun and the Sea of Stories 1990, and the last one is Quixote 2019. That's all from us. Thank you for your attention and have a good day.